She was only 9 years old when she released Out Here on My Own.
Sometimes I wonder where.
A song about loneliness performed by a child who had no idea how real those lyrics would one day become. Nikka Costa was an international phenomenon. Her records sold well and gained recognition in several countries across Europe and Latin America.
So glad I have you to cuddle up to. So glad I have you. I believe it every time I.
But away from the spotlight, there was a little girl trying to cope with a childhood she never chose to live. When she lost her father, Don Costa, her mentor and producer, the pain was drowned out by commitments. With no room to grieve, no room to stop, Nikka was forced to keep smiling, promoting an album she had recorded just days before the tragedy. And then she vanished, disappeared from the spotlight. Years later, she would return, but this time in full control of her career. This is the story of Nikka Costa, and maybe it's far deeper than you ever imagined. If you love powerful stories from the music world, you're in the right place. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. Before she even understood what fame was, Nikka Costa was already part of it. Daughter of the maestro and producer Don Costa, she grew up surrounded by some of the biggest names in American music. Frank Sinatra, a close friend of her father, became her grandfather. Quincy Jones and Sammy Davis Jr. were regular guests in their home. Music wasn't just a career plan, it was the environment she grew up in. Nikka was born in 1972 in Tokyo, while her parents were attending the Tokyo Music Festival. As a young child, she improvised songs at home for family friends. At age 5, she performed on stage with the Hawaiian singer Don Ho in a Christmas special. At 7, she charmed an audience in Milan, singing with her father's orchestra. In 1981, she released her first album, which included the hit Out Here on My Own, originally sung by Irene Cara in the movie Fame.
I close my eyes so I can be with you.
Oh, baby, be strong for me. Baby, be.
Months later, she appeared at the Viña del Mar Festival in Chile alongside Don Costa, who was part of the jury and performed with his daughter. That same event featured The Police, then a rising international sensation with 4 albums and several chart-topping singles as the main international act. Recording popular songs with orchestral arrangements created specifically for her young voice, Nikka gained international recognition. In 1983, she released the album Fairy Tales. But while her career was heading to the top, her personal life was suddenly shaken. Nikka lost her father to heart failure. The impact was devastating. Despite her grief, she was sent on tour to promote the newly released album. Years later, she revealed that the experience felt uncomfortable and that the media heavily exploited her father's death. "I didn't want to sing for a while. I was only 10. I wasn't thinking about a career," she recalled. Don Costa's death marked the abrupt end of a brief but intense family partnership. He had been the one to launch and guide his daughter in the studio and on stage. Over the years, Nikka came to understand more deeply the role he had played, not only in her life, but in American music as a whole. "I knew he worked with important people, but I only realized how talented he was later, when others started telling me stories about who he had been," she remembered. In her teenage years, Nikka went back to recording, but without artistic freedom. At 14, she released an album in Europe only to fulfill contractual obligations. The songs, which she later described as throwaway pop, didn't represent her. The label was trying to mold her into a generic pop star. With no creative space, she chose to step away once again.
Flying at last, first time out. Don't cry, don't make it harder than it is. I'll always love you. Walk me through the fire, unafraid. No guarantee that we will be together forever.
Despite her early success and impressive sales numbers, Nikka experienced what many child artists go through: the burden of a career that began without autonomy. She was celebrated worldwide before she even had a say in who she was or what she wanted to sing. Only after finishing high school did she begin searching for her true artistic identity. Inspired by soul and funk icons like Aretha Franklin and Stevie Wonder, she spent hours listening to tapes, trying to decipher harmonies and understand song structures. It was during this journey of personal discovery that she made a decision. She would stay in music, but on her own terms. In the early 90s, she moved to Australia, far from the pressures of the industry and the image that had been built for her in childhood. Nikka began writing songs, formed her first bands, and found the freedom to experiment. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where, for the first time, she would have full control over her own story. In Australia, Nikka began writing her own songs, taught herself how to play guitar and keyboards, formed small bands, and tested her ideas in bar gigs. It was during this more mature phase that her musical identity began to take shape. She blended elements of funk, soul, rock, and R&B, and started exploring her voice with more freedom. I remember the day I realized my voice could change. It could be raspy, soft, or powerful. It felt like I had discovered a whole new part of myself, she said in an interview. In 1996, she released the album Butterfly Rocket under Mushroom Records. It was the first record Nikka truly felt was her own, an original project that reflected who she was. The album earned her a nomination for Best New Artist at the Australian Recording Industry Awards. To her, those years in Australia felt like a real-life college. The audience there was demanding and used to live shows, which pushed her to grow as a stage performer. A few years later, she and the producer Justin Stanley, who would later become her husband, moved back to the United States. That's when Nikka's career took a new turn. The producer Dominique Trenier, impressed by one of her live performances, introduced her to DJ Mark Ronson. The three of them began working together on the album that would change everything. Everybody Got Their Something, released in 2001. Even before its release, her song Like a Feather was already playing in a Tommy Hilfiger commercial, creating buzz and anticipation. The album introduced American audiences to a reinvented Nikka, bold, energetic, and with a sound that combined soul, rock, and modern beats. The track Push and Pull was featured on the soundtrack of the movie Blow, and a few years later, she went on tour with Lenny Kravitz on the Electric Church One Night Only tour. 2 more albums followed, Can't Never Did Nothin' in 2005 and Pebble to a Pearl in 2008. The first featured more personal songs, including Fatherless Child, a heartfelt tribute to her father. Around that time, Nikka married Justin Stanley, and in 2006, their first daughter, Sugar, was born. Motherhood brought a quiet but meaningful shift. Little by little, she began slowing down her career, not from lack of inspiration, but by choice. Between 2010 and 2017, Nikka released only 2 albums. Instead of going on tour, she chose to stay home. Having spent her childhood in airplanes, hotels, and studios, she made a point to give her children a different kind of life, one with more time, more presence, and more routine. Her decision to step back wasn't a sacrifice, but a conscious gesture, almost a way of breaking the cycle. In taking on this new role, she reconnected not only with motherhood, but also with her own childhood, with everything she had, and more importantly, with everything she lacked. In 2017, she returned with the project Nikka and Strings, Underneath and In Between, which showcased a more intimate and classical side of the singer.
Nothing can stop these lonely tears from
The album featured softer renditions of Prince songs. Nikka was a friend and protege of his. In 2024, she released Dirty Disco, a dance-driven album inspired by 1970s funk, but delivered with a modern edge. For her, now 53, this comeback means more than just a new record. It's a reunion with the joy of singing, with the stage, and with her audience. This is the story of Nikka Costa, an artist who started young, faced the loss of her father, stepped away from music during her grief, reinvented herself, and came back on her own terms in her own time. She proved that talent can impress, but it's the courage to start over that truly builds a lasting career. If you've enjoyed learning about her journey, don't forget to like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss when a new story drops. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. I'll be back next week with another powerful story from the world of music.